loud enough as it is, but hi, I'm Kim McNicholas. I'm an Emmy award-winning journalist here in the Bay Area. I work for Channel 4, and I don't know if you've seen me, but I'm really happy to be a part of this community. We have amazing folks here. I've lived here pretty much all my life, so I'm really happy to be a part of this debate and hear what both candidates have to say. A big thank you also to all of you for being here today, not only for being here, but so many of you have sent so many questions. Every question that's here tonight came from the community, came from someone in the community. Many were redundant, so we just looped them into the same questions. So I think we'll get most of the questions that seem to be the consensus of the community answered tonight. If there are questions that still arise throughout the evening, just spot Justin. He is going to have note cards such as these. Some of you have filled them out already. He'll have note cards that he'll be passing around. Just catch him. He'll give you a pen and a note card to add another question in there, and we will try as best as we can to get to them. If we don't get to all of your questions tonight, what we're going to ask is if the candidates don't mind that we create a list of these questions and send them to you via email, and if you can answer them, and then maybe we can post them on Nextdoor for the community to see those answers as well. We want to do our best to make sure that all of you have your questions answered, every one of your questions answered. So each candidate is going to start with a 5-minute intro, and then for every single question, each candidate is going to get 2 minutes to answer. Because we do have so many questions that we do want to get to tonight, if you wouldn't mind, not only in consideration of time, but also out of respect to each one of the candidates, if you would please hold all reaction, all applause, any reaction, you know what I'm talking about, to the end, the very, very end. And then you can applause and react in however you so choose. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay. So let's get started. We are going to, yes.
The end of what?
The end of the entire session. And I believe, do we have a coin that we can toss to see who goes first?
Anybody can build.
Yeah, let's just change the pocket. There's a daughter has Okay.
One trick nickel.
You're right.
Great. I've never, I'm not a referee, I don't know how I'm doing this. Okay, so call it in the air, heads or tails. Anyone know how they do this?
Someone has to call it.
Someone has to call it. Who's going to call it?
I'll call heads.
I don't think she went to a board school.
You gotta flip it.
Okay. Come on. Anyone here want to flip this thing?
Oh, good job.
There you go.
It's rolling around, and we have tails.
All right.
Okay, so if we can start the timer, and then you will start.
Good. Bill, let me know when. Thank you, Kim. Good evening, everyone. I'm Damon Connolly, and I appreciate the opportunity to share my background, why I'm running for Marin County Supervisor, and my vision for District 1 and for Marinwood and Lucas Valley. I've been honored to serve for the past 7 years as a member of the San Rafael City Council, currently as the city's vice mayor, and before that as president of the Dixie School Board. I have strong ties to this community. I'm a nearby resident on Las Colinas Avenue, and before that lived in Casa Marinwood. My wife and I moved to the community 18 years ago with our 2 daughters for some of the same reasons I'm sure many of you moved here. The exceptional schools, the strong environmental ethic, and the appreciation and love for the natural beauty and open space that surrounds us. These local values are what make Marin unique. I respect the incredible foresight shown by longer-term residents like my in-laws, who are actually here this evening, and who live in Lucas Valley, in purchasing open space in their neighborhood. And I'm heartened that the mantle is now being taken up by a new generation on issues of development and ensuring it is done right. I will continue to stand with you on those issues. I'm passionate about our public schools, and that's why I decided to serve on the Dixie School Board. I focused on keeping and recruiting strong teachers and healthier lifestyles for our kids through more biking and walking to school and healthy, more natural food choices. I have a hands-on perspective on how development decisions affect our schools because of my service. As a council member, one of my top priorities has been to establish better relationships with our neighborhoods, beginning with better listening, communication, and responsiveness. My leadership on the Civic Center Priority Development Area vote was a case in point. Working with affected neighborhoods, I actually led the opposition and that resulted in rescinding high-density development proposals in those neighborhoods. And we came up with a great station area plan while we were at it. I was also instrumental in working with the community to achieve the shared services agreement for fire services with Marinwood, something many thought could never be done. I've been tapping into the innovation of community members in other ways. I've been focused on improving our local economy through encouraging entrepreneurship and actually establishing a business incubator in town for new small businesses. And I've tightened the belt of the city through necessary budget and pension reforms, which I hope we can speak with. I've been an environmental leader. Through my chairmanship of Marin Clean Energy, we're providing local residents with more choices on achieving renewable energy for our households. I've been a leader in working with the community on watersheds and wetland protection and on climate change, including leading efforts to implement the city's climate change action plan. My vision, Marin should be the leader in the nation on environmental issues, and I'll work with you to achieve that. I made the decision to run for supervisor and take on a 12-year incumbent because what I've heard from the community and what I believe personally is we need a change. We need a supervisor who listens, who puts the needs and concerns of residents first, and provides more effective, responsive leadership. We need a supervisor who builds bridges and brings people together rather than driving our community apart. As a public official, I have not been shy or afraid to take tough stands on behalf of my constituents. But I do so through collaboration and bringing as many people into the process as possible. That is why I've attracted a wide range of support in this campaign, including my colleagues who have unanimously endorsed me. Business as usual is not working. The old model of simply electing officials who go off and make decisions with little input is no longer acceptable. Our community is more engaged than ever. Our elected officials must be too. That is my pledge to you, and I very much look forward to our discussion this evening.
Thank
I
you.
did cut out
Thank
one
you, Damon.
sentence, so you guys already know I'm a boy.
Are you ready, Bill? That's a really loud
Gotta get the thing working.
We have extra entertainment.
Okay.
All right, well, hello neighbors. I've lived in this community for 27 years in Roundtree, a block away from Marinwood Plaza. And I think Damon and I have probably memorized each other's stump speeches by now because we've done a number of these over the course of these last several weeks. And we're coming down to the home stretch. I want to apologize for being a few minutes late. I was trying to get out of my last meeting and working on the business of the county representing you. But for those of you that don't know me, I've been on the Board of Supervisors for more than 11 years now. I'm a nurse practitioner, delivered babies for a living for a lot of my career. I'm an educator, I'm a mother, and I'm a grandmother. And when I moved here, as Damon moved here, and many of us did, it was because of what we have to offer here in this amazing community. The great schools, the beautiful natural resources, and mostly friendly neighbors. And I've developed a lot of really deep relationships in this community over the years. My kids went to Dixie School. My grandson just graduated with his diploma from Marin School, and he's currently living with me. I'm raising my grandson. I have been working very hard, and you don't accomplish the things that I've been able to accomplish without having built relationships, making connections, building bridges. My whole career has been about caring for people, and my mantra has been healthy people, healthy communities, and healthy planet. And I've been bringing that lens to the Board of Supervisors as a healthcare provider for my last years in office. I know that in 3 terms, I've probably made everybody in this room unhappy with at least one vote that I've made. But that's what happens when you're an incumbent, and Damon has his own political record that we will be able to debate in a little bit. But neither Damon nor I are new to political life, and I would ask that you compare the list of accomplishments that we've had on behalf of our community. Promises are easy to make, slogans are easy to create, but the proof is in the deliverables, and I've delivered especially when it comes to environmental protection. When I first ran for office, the city of San Rafael was on track to annex and place a massive development at St. Vincent's. Those of you that are longtime residents might remember that. The city's general plan called for 2,100 units of housing and a couple 100,000 square feet of commercial between both the St. Vincent's and Silveira property. At that time, I proposed that those sites were not appropriate for development and massive urbanization, and that we should instead be looking at our infill, underutilized sites, commercial sites especially. That has been in alignment with the environmental community, with the Sierra Club, and I have once again achieved the endorsement of the Sierra Club because of my strong environmental positions. I'd like to point out that 12 years later, there's still cows grazing at St. Vincent's and Silveira. There hasn't been development, nor has there been a proposal. But I've also delivered for this community in other important ways. And when White Enterprises was proposing a couple of projects that didn't fit with the community character, one being a big box hardware store, another being a hotel operation, and the community said, no, that isn't what we want here. Members of the community approached me and said, we need to start talking about what it is we want. And that launched about 8 years ago, a long process, community-based planning process, where community leaders worked to create what has become the famous or infamous guiding principles and vision plan for the Marinwood Plaza. And over the course of that time, there have been 2 market rate developers that have tried to make something work that weren't able to make it pencil out with what the community was asking. We've had many, many meetings, and the community said, no housing until we get a grocery store. Well, I got us a farmer's market, and we have a grocery store. I brought that to the community. The community said, fix the freeway jumping in the morning. It's creating terrible congestion. I did that. There's no more freeway jumping. I crafted the language that Assemblymember Levine is carrying that will give us here in Marin County suburban status, lowering our densities from 30 units per acre to 20 units per acre, and I've spent a lot of time in Sacramento working on that. Part of leadership is not only listening to the people you think will get you elected, but listening to those who may have a different opinion. And I'm listening to all of my community members. I've done a very good job, I think, in building consensus on issues, and I look forward to our conversation tonight.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have a whole bunch of questions, and what I do ask once again is, you've done great already, holding your class till the end, and also for the candidates, out of respect for all of the folks that are giving up their evening here, we've heard the generalities, we want to hear specifics. So please, if you can, stick to the facts and the specifics, and leave the hope and faith and change for other politicians outside of this room. So let's get started, and I'm more than happy because I know it's easy to forget the question when it goes from one candidate to another. Feel free to ask me to repeat the question as well. And since we did start with Damon in the speeches, we're going to start with you on the first question. And thank you again to the audience for all of these questions. Many residents have concerns that high concentrations of affordable developments create socioeconomic islands of poverty. Should our county advocate for concentrations of tax-exempt housing that exceed the state mandate of 20% affordable to the point that new developments are not financially self-sustainable?
Okay, well, first there's no state mandate for 20% affordable. What the state mandate is comes from housing element law that's been in place since 1969 that says every city and town and county needs to identify where their full range of housing is going to be in their community, whether it's market rate or affordable. And the process that happens at the local level. Local communities, when a property owner goes into contract with a developer, they submit a plan and it goes through a public process. Right now, we've just launched the public process for the proposal from the Marinwood Plaza. And the community weighed in on what it was they wanted studied. There's going to be some reports generated, and at some point down the road, we'll get to the place of, is this an appropriate development for this site? The issue about affordable housing, affordable in Marin County is based on the median income of our community. Our median income is about $95,000 a year. And so that means affordable or low-income families are families of 4 that are earning $65,000 a year or less. These are teachers that my colleague and I both support, who are making $45,000 a year as a starting salary. Our child care workers, our in-home support service workers that are making $12.10 an hour. These are the people we're talking about that would be fitting within the affordable housing definition. And my question is, do we as a community think it's important that our teachers and our service workers and our child care workers have an opportunity to live in the community that they're working in and to not have to drive 60 minutes or 90 minutes from a farther away place? We import the majority of our workforce into this community. Certainly, whatever happens needs to happen that reflects the character of our community. Thank you.
Do you need me to repeat the question?
I think I have it. This is the #1 issue on people's minds, and it goes beyond affordable housing. It's really concentrated development, particularly in District 1. The fact is that over 70% of all of the development called for in the countywide housing element for unincorporated Marin is located in District 1. Supervisor Adams touted her record on St. Vincent Silveira. I happen to agree with her back in 2002 that that area should stay preserved because of its significance. But now the county's calling for up to 221 units of housing, so she has changed her position on that issue. Marinwood Plaza, they're calling for concentrated development next to the freeway. I assume we'll get a chance to weigh in on that on a separate question. I actually oppose the plan as proposed. And of course, Grady Ranch, another 240 units. The fact is the city is taking a fundamentally different way of approaching affordable housing, because what I'm also hearing is we all agree as a community we need to provide alternatives for people at different incomes for housing in our community and society. We do use an inclusionary zoning approach where if there's new development, 20% of it has to be affordable. We're focused on converting existing housing and commercial space into affordable housing, renovations, second units. There's absolutely no reason that affordable housing has to be equated with high-density housing. And I think the community is spot on that. Let's be more creative. There's entrepreneurs out there right now looking at ways of dividing larger homes into affordable units. I'm willing to work with the community on coming up with better solutions, and I'm running on our track record in San Rafael in taking a different approach.
Okay, and we're going to start with you, Damon, on this one. We're just going to keep switching off as to who will come first. And you mentioned the bridge housing proposal, and so that's where we're going next. Do you support the development of Marinwood Plaza as currently proposed by Bridge Housing? Given that a recent survey notice to the entire community with more than 500 responses demonstrates strong disapproval for Bridge's proposal, how do each of you believe the project should progress from this point, and how do you intend to make this happen in the role of supervisor?
So as I presaged, I do oppose the plan as proposed for 4 reasons. One is it's inconsistent with the community vision plan that the community did come up with as of 2006, specifically The community wants more retail space and a gathering space to make it functional for our community, and I agree with that. The second issue is because it is, originally was 100% affordable, now I believe it's 72 out of 82 units. It's largely tax exempt. That has implications for our financing of our school system. I don't think that's adequately been dealt with. In fact, the issue was almost ignored until the very end where the process came forward. That was unacceptable. I also believe that the scale and mass of the project is too big. I also believe that there are legitimate environmental concerns about this project. Number one, it sits on a toxic plume. That absolutely has to be remediated. And secondly, what science is now showing is we ought to be moving away from locating high-density developments right next to the freeway. The low-income portion of this proposal is next to the freeway. There are health concerns with that. These will be dealt with through the environmental impact report process. Something needs to be done in Marinwood Plaza. I'm willing to work with the community. I'd like to reopen the community process, work with all stakeholders. I'm a mediator by trade. I should mention I'm a lawyer as well. But I am willing to get in there. I think there's a mandate from the community to reopen this process, and we can come up with a great solution for Marinwood Plaza.
Thank you. The process is open. It's called the environmental review process, and we just had a scoping session. And it's too early to determine what the factors are. I always make the decisions based on what the studies show and community input. And I would like to point out that San Rafael, in June of 2012, passed their station area plan calling for residential density above 44 units per acre and looking at 4- and 5-story multi-unit developments around the smart station. And that was passed unanimously by the City Council in August of 2012. After the county removed Marinwood from the PDA, the city removed the Civic Center from their PDA. And if you look at the multifamily units that are in the city of San Rafael, up and down the 101 corridor, there's 3- to 5-story multifamily apartments. The most recent one was built right across from the Civic Center, 4 stories, 88 units, 10% affordable. It went bankrupt, and it has been a white elephant. To his credit, Mr. Connolly did not support that. However, he wasn't able to get the third vote to say no. And that wasn't the only time that that happened. And part of leadership is having somebody on the board who can convince at least 2 other people to go along with what you're trying to do. And I've had great success in doing that. I think that the fact that we have only 221 units capped around the H complex for the St. Vincent's and Silveira properties was a huge change from what San Rafael was planning. And it's 10% of what was expected, and I wasn't able to get the third vote for no growth there, but I was able to move my board from 500 down to 221. So part of that is how do you get the votes that you need to bring your issues closer. I think that the process will work. When we had Oakview developed, 20 years it took for that EIR process, and we still don't see housing built on that property.
Okay, the question though, do you actually support the proposal as it stands right now?
I think that it's within the concepts of that the community put forward. 100 units cap, they're proposing 82, and the environmental review process will determine if that's an appropriate amount. So I support redevelopment with mixed-use housing and commercial there.
And so Bridges' proposal allows them the option to only build the southern parcel of 72 units of affordable housing, allowing them to opt out of the commercial northern lot altogether if Bridge determines it doesn't make sense for them. How will Bridge be held accountable to follow through with their entire plan and not just the southern parcel? If we have to be stuck with an already bad plan, who's going to ensure that it doesn't end up even worse? For example, mid-commercial.
Well, it's an opinion whether it's an already bad plan. There are certainly a number of people in the community that do support redevelopment. I hear from them as well. And the opt-out of commercial is not something that they're proposing. I've talked to the bridge leadership. They're going to do the whole project. They might work with another commercial developer to make the north end work, but it'll all be part of the package. And the community is getting 20,000 square feet of commercial total. That was what was in the guiding principles. We have the grocery store already, which is 15,000 square feet. And they're proposing another 7,000 plus square feet of commercial. There's a member of my Lions Club that wants to open a brew pub there. I'm kind of excited about that. I'd love to do off-campus meetings at the brew pub in the new plaza. They're talking about having the community gathering space and continuing to maintain the farmers market site. So there's a lot in there that does follow with the conceptual guidelines, but they were conceptual guidelines. They weren't zoning guidelines. The other thing that you know, I want to go back to that 70% of all development. In this next housing element, this housing element expires at the end of the year where we had to find 773 units to submit to the state. This coming year, we only have to find 185. The city of San Rafael has to find 1,007. My question to my colleague here is, where are you going to put 1,007 units that will pass certification? And you can't just do it with conversions and second units. The state will turn it back. They did that with us for several months and almost a couple of years, because we were going to do conversions in Southern Marin of 150 units. They said, great, we'll give you credit for those, and they ended up only giving us credit for about 30 of those. So the state makes their decision. If you don't pass your housing element, then you have legal forces that come after you. You also are at risk of foregoing all your regular transit dollars as well.
Do you want me to reread?
Sure.
Okay. This is in regards to the proposal and allowing them the option, Bridges' proposal allows them the option to only build the southern parcel of 72 units of affordable housing, allowing them to opt out of the commercial northern lot altogether if Bridge determines it doesn't make sense for them. How will Bridge be held accountable to follow through with their entire plan and not just the southern parcel? If we have to, as a community, be stuck with some considering that plan, who's going to ensure that it doesn't end up even worse?
So good question. Periodically, I'm going to have to go back and rebut some things that were said in the last answer, though. First of all, it's absolutely inaccurate to say that San Rafael voted to rescind our PDA after the supervisors voted to rescind Marinwood. We did so in September 2013. The supervisors rescinded Marinwood in January 2014. It's in the public record. I don't know what basis you have for saying that. The fact is, as you pointed out, August 2012, the actual decision to finalize the plan was in September 2013, and I did carry it with 3 votes. During that intervening year, working extensively with the community, we were able to actually enact the original lower densities that I was proposing. I got 2 colleagues to agree with me. Read the plan for yourselves. You'll see what I'm talking about. There is an absolutely legitimate issue with what Bridge is proposing in terms of phasing or leaving the option clearly to do that versus what the community vision was, which was to build it all at the same time. Again, the whole premise in terms of the existing community is we need more retail. The Bridge plan, and here again Supervisor Adams is incorrect, calls for 7,000 square feet. The vision was up to 12,000 square feet, excluding the grocery store. So that's a big difference. I would insist that any developer stick to the idea of doing retail as part of it. Regarding the 1,007 units, San Rafael doesn't have to do anything. We already got our housing element approved. It's certified by the state under the principles I outlined for you earlier. We don't have to do any change in zoning, whereas you would.
Okay, considering that a new school would not be allowed to be built at the Marinwood Plaza due to the risk of children developing chronic, life-threatening illnesses associated with freeway proximity and recently discovered benzene concentrations, among other known environmental issues, Is it safe or appropriate for this same site to house school-aged children, families, and residents? Do you believe such housing should be planned near transportation corridors at all?
That's a couple of different questions, and the first part I did touch on in a prior answer. I am concerned about the health effects of developing high-density housing in close proximity to the freeway. These issues will be elaborated on as part of the EIR process. My understanding, and I'm not a scientist, is we're moving away from that as a concept. Supervisor Adams often points out that, well, if you drive up and down 101, there's high-rises. Well, many of those were built in the 1950s. My wife's grandma lived in one back in the day. I'm not sure we would do that necessarily in this day and age. So that's an issue that I think is legitimate, that we need to look at. In terms of transit-oriented development, it does make sense to the extent we do new development, and again, my bottom line is it has to be appropriate for the community, and again, that's why I towed the line on the PDA in Civic Center, is it's good to have access to transit. We've done that effectively in downtown. But I'll tell you, the voters never would have passed the SMART train if they knew that it was going to be simply a gateway to high-density development. It was designed and voted for as a transit solution. That's the basis I support it. It is not a means of saying, okay, now we must have high-density development. So I agree with the concept that, look, we ought to be giving people a number of different transit options, multimodal. We don't necessarily equate that with, so that therefore let's overdevelop our community.
No, I think I have it. The housing element that we have current is expired, and I believe San Rafael is starting their next cycle for their new housing element, where you do have to find 1,007 units. Regarding SMART, it's a little disingenuous to say you didn't know the density, because you and I sat in the bagel shop a number of times talking about train and SMART, and you were a very strong supporter for it, even though I brought up the density issues. When I went to Washington and I had them look at the proposal, they said the assumptions for federal funding come with 2,000 units of housing within a half a mile of a train station if you're going to get that housing. And I raised that issue. I was one of the few political people that actually raised the issue and raised criticism about SMART when it was being put in front of the voters. Air quality is certainly important. And we have a Dixie bus maintenance yard right next to where the proposed housing is going to be. We don't know where those emissions are coming from, but we do need to investigate them. We do need to mitigate for them. I serve on the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and one of the issues that they have been really focusing on is not only air quality and benzene, but black carbon. Certainly, when you're closer to a freeway, it creates a higher concern level. And the question will be, can there be mitigations that will offset that? We don't have a lot of places in Marin County to grow. And especially if we're going to protect places like St. Vincent Silveira, or if we're not supporting housing down at Grady. And I personally think that family housing down at Grady is not a good idea. It's like 5 miles down the road. It would be traffic oriented. However, property owners do have a right to submit a development proposal, and just like I can't tell them they don't have a right to go through the process, I can't tell you you don't have a right to put an addition on your home. So there is a process, and there's going to be community and public input, and we'll evaluate it.
Okay, well, Marin residents are really concerned about making sure that you're heard, right? So they've never really had a chance to vote for or against the bridge housing project. The county focuses on affordable housing advocacy while they ignore, they claim, the concerns of the families who have built, protected, and loved this peaceful and safe community. Marinwood families are concerned about how community opposition to the project has been ignored. Do you feel the project should have gotten to this point before first quantifying whether the majority of local residents truly support or oppose the project?
Starting with me. Okay, so nobody's been ignored. We actually, how process usually works is a developer comes in, goes to the planning office and says, this is what I want to do, and the planners look at it and say, okay, now we have to start our scoping session. Most times, people don't have an opportunity for an 8-year period to talk about what they'd like to have happen at the plaza and to create guiding principles and the vision for what the community should look like. And we did that. We did that, and it was very extensive. We had leadership meetings. We had multiple large community meetings. We filled more people in the rooms during those meetings than what we have here tonight. And there was a lot of input as we were going through what does the community want. Now, we're at the place where the developer's doing what they normally do. They come in and they propose a development. And we're starting the public process now. And certainly, we're going to be listening to all of the issues. We're going to be evaluating the studies. We're going to be listening to the community concerns. We're going to be making sure that issues like traffic and air quality and benzene and the toxic plume and aesthetics and all of those things that are a concern to the community are addressed. And I've done this before, not just in this community, but I worked in the San Rafael Rock Quarry on helping to bring that community together that imposed 172 conditions of operation that now allows a quarry to continue operating in a community where there was silica dust and other things that were causing problems for that community. And both sides came to the Board of Supervisors to say that that deal was fair. I have a history and a record of doing that in other projects, and I commit to you that I'll do it here. I live in Roundtree. You guys think I'm gonna vote for something that's gonna ruin the quality of my life and have y'all yelling at me for the next 40 years? It's not gonna happen. I've been here 27 years and I'm committed to stay here, and I still want to have y'all as my friends when I'm done with this job.
I think I have it. There was a process leading up to the 2006 vision plan. That's actually when I was president of the Dixie School Board. There were forums. I think I participated in one with Supervisor Adams. There was a vote on an ordinance with the County Board of Supervisors. The issue, though, is how do we get from point A to B? How do we go from there to where we are now? And that's where the community disconnect is. My sense in talking to residents in Marinwood is there's a feeling that it ended up coming down to a smaller, hand-picked group of folks figuring out what to do with the site. And it turns out they didn't really cover all the key issues. I actually got tuned into that fact when a couple years ago, right here in this room, there was a forum on the bridge proposal. And the issue of the impact on school finance came up. And it was literally as if it was the first time that they had ever heard of the issue when the community brought it up. And in fact, it's probably the key issue among many, because basically the way our schools are financed as basic aid districts is even if there are more students, there isn't any more money to the schools. It's actually a good status to have. It means your property taxes cover, generally speaking, what your operations are for schools. The downside, though, is you get no additional money for additional students. And we haven't even gotten a straight answer on the number of additional students. The Dixie School District will be filled to capacity by 2016-17 without any new development. We need to figure out what happens if there is significant new development. To reopen a school, $2 million. To build a new school, $4 to $5 million. It's not a chump change we're talking about. So we absolutely have to honestly address these issues.
And just following up on that, I'm going to skip around a little bit. Since nonprofit housing, such as what's proposed at Marin Village, contributes minimally to the local tax base for infrastructure, schools, government services, and reducing pension deficits, where will you find the funding to make up for the loss for this and future developments, especially considering Marinwood and Lucas Valley has received a disproportionate 70% of the affordable housing allocations for the Marin County 2012 housing element? And I know you said that we will have to make up the funding, but how would you propose we make up that funding loss?
Well, again, I think that's putting the cart before the horse. I think we have to question whether the development is appropriate at the level being called for because of the impacts. One thing Supervisor Adams has been saying is the Dixie District may fall out of basic aid status. In other words, revert to average daily attendance, which means you get money based on the number of students. I recently checked with the school district leadership. That is speculative. There's no guarantee that it will fall out of basic aid status. The Dixie District, excuse me, does that off and on. And our ideal is to retain basic aid status because of the more stable funding that provides. So to essentially see it as a good thing to fall out simply because it expediently may deal with this issue is not an appropriate way to proceed. What we have to do, and one-time funding is not going to do it either. That's the other, at least, rumored proposal that I'm hearing. We've got to step back, honestly evaluate what are going to be the fiscal impacts on the schools. And I believe with my background as a school board member, my relationships, I'm endorsed by every school board member of the Dixie School District, as well as 4 out of 5 members of the San Rafael School Board. I can walk the walk on working with the school community, parents, concerned residents on this issue.
And just even say yes or no, so what you're saying is we just can't afford it?
From what I've seen.
Okay, and so, Susan?
Well, you know, Dixie has been in and out of basic aid as long as Dixie's been Dixie. There have been times when it's been a revenue limit school. At one time, there were 8 elementary schools and 2 middle schools, 40 kids in the class. When my kids were here in the mid-'80s, there were only 2 elementary schools and 1 middle school. Schools expand and contract depending on people who are moving in and out, and as older people move out, new families move in, which I think it's great that we have some vibrancy of young families. Then we have to face, how do we fund this? How do we deal with this? Now, there are a number of seniors that live in our community. Seniors can exempt themselves from paying school taxes. Many of the people that have been here a long time are paying lower Prop 13 taxes than the newer families that are moving here. There are a lot of complications and that go along with trying to figure out how schools are funded. And with Prop 30 going into effect and more revenue coming into our schools, our chief financial officer at the county believes that within 3 years, regardless of whether or not Marinwood Plaza gets developed, that it'll resort back into a revenue limit school, and we'll need to deal with that. The issue about where does the funding come from? If the Marinwood Plaza project goes forward, that's a big if, after all the process that goes through. If the project goes forward, I've been working with the county administrator and the Marin Community Foundation to set up a line item trust to help offset the cost of whatever the losses might be if the basic aid funding really is still in place. And we've been working with the school district. We've had meetings with the superintendent of Dixie. We've had meetings with some of the school board members. A school board member was involved with the discussions when we were talking about, you know, what's going to happen at the Marinwood Plaza. Certainly, I want Dixie School to be continuing to be the excellent school that it's been for decades. And I believe that all of our children should have a quality education in our public school systems.
Now keep in mind once again that these are questions from the community. So knowing that most of our workforce, such as teachers, firefighters, policemen, etc., earn too much to qualify for affordable housing, how will the plan to import low-income families into Marin not negatively result in a surf class working minimum wage and low-paying jobs that are meant for our kids to work, to learn the soft skills needed to compete in the workplace? Once low-income families find residence in Marin, what's to keep them from acquiring a higher-paying job in other locales, such as San Francisco?
Okay, well, you know, the assumption is that somehow families that are earning $65,000 a year or less are not families that we want in our community, and I take issue with that. The people that are earning that money are people that are our teachers and our service workers and our child care workers. Child care workers make $30,000 a year. Our teachers start in Dixie at $45,000 or so a year. Our service workers, our in-home support service workers make $12.10 an hour, and they're helping to keep our seniors and disabled people in their homes. And they have to come from far away. If you look at other bridge programs, and I've actually taken a tour, they've offered the opportunity for any one of you to contact them so that you can see what their programs look like in Marin. They have 8 of them. One of them is the Rotary Village on Lucas Valley Road, 80 units of low-income housing for our seniors. Well-maintained, taken care of, didn't lower property values, and it was a tax exempt. And yet, those seniors are calling for paramedics and fire services too. Yet we as a community have managed to figure out how to incorporate and embrace our seniors in the community. So, you know, the idea that somehow our working families that are part of the fabric of our community, if they're not making a certain income level, shouldn't be here, it sounds like that's the way the question is being asked. And as having been a single mom raising my kids in this community, I couldn't have made it unless I had the support of my community and my family to make ends meet. And the people that are making a lower amount of money, they may not be able to write big checks, but in the testimony in the scoping session, one woman said she started the SCRIP program that's bringing at least $10,000 a year into Dixie School. So they volunteer, they care about their kids too. And so I do think that we have to talk about, you know, what kind of community do we want to be going forward?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think the common ground we do share as a community is that we do agree that there needs to be housing for people earning a range of incomes so that they can live here. We do believe that people should have more opportunities to live closer to where they work. I agree with that. Really, it's how we get there. And again, the issue I'm hearing loud and clear is the debate and the disagreement that it has to be high-density housing next to the freeway. Again, we're taking a different approach in Santa Fe. But let me address another issue that the question kind of gets at, and that is the social equity piece. Frankly, it's appalling how much we are paying certain workers in society. I actually believe that we should be looking at raising the minimum wage. If Congress doesn't have the ability to do that, maybe we need to look at doing that locally. We should be paying a living wage in Marin. One of my votes, and that probably engenders kind of a split of opinion, is I decided to vote against the Target super big box store in Santa Fe a couple years ago because of that concern. When you look at the new Target business model, and particularly the large grocery store piece, they're paying wages about half of what our supermarkets in town pay, and they're paying minimal benefits. That was a concern to me. So I think it's not only the housing side, but it's the social equity side. But on housing, again, I think legitimate issues are being raised about development and the impact of development on our community, even given that we need affordable housing.
Median income families earn too much to qualify for affordable housing, yet they too are struggling to afford to live in Marin and send their kids to our amazing public schools just as much as anyone else. Is it fair for the county to advocate so much just for the low-income families while neglecting the very real needs of our median income families and residents?
Well, again, I think we have an obligation to advocate for all residents. And the way I see it is we, again, are trying to strike the right balance. We want, the way I look at it is essentially answering several questions. One is what makes Marin unique? Why do people move here? And when they move here, why do they stay? I think it is our local shared values that we appreciate our strong schools, We appreciate the environmental ethic, the natural open space and beauty. So development is not unlimited. And there are some who will argue that because a lot of our forebears, so to speak, in Marin had the wisdom to protect agricultural zoning in West Marin, that somehow that means that we have to urbanize essentially our neighborhoods along the 101 corridor. To me, that sets up a false choice. I think we preserve West Marin, but we fight those forces, whether they be regional or otherwise, that are imposing top-down solutions on us in our communities. Supervisor Adams was the vice president of AVAG when the PDAs came to Marin. She was a leader in that effort. And as I've indicated, I have not hesitated to stand up when I feel that that level of development is inappropriate for our communities. That said, I look forward to working with the community on striking the right balance. These are all legitimate needs, and it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Well, moderate income families also can be in one class of affordable housing. The classifications for affordable housing are moderate, low, very low, and then market rate. And when we submit a housing element, we have to show a range of all of those types of housing based on our general plan. And our general plans determine where lands are zoned for housing potential. Just because something is zoned for housing potential doesn't mean it gets built. Look what just happened with Lucas's commercial property. He had to reopen his environmental review because he wanted to do creek restoration. That didn't work. He decided after there was some dust up about it that he was going to not develop. Well, that land then converts back to what the regular zoning was in the general plan. And every city and town and county has one of those. I live in higher density housing in Roundtree. I chose to live in there. I like having my neighbors nearby. There's 3 complexes right in the same area as the Marinwood Village. Now, if we're going to do something at the plaza, it should be respectful of what's already there. But I'll tell you, the sheriff was out there a number of times before we got the market with drug deals, graffiti, vandalism, not exactly the jewel of our community, Gateway, opening up. And there has to be a proposal that's based in reality. It has to work. Commercial doesn't work there. I tried for a number of years, along with members in the leadership, to try to get commercial in there. When you've got Northgate on one end and you've got all the Nevada retail on the other, people have other choices, and commercial by itself doesn't work there. So the mixed use of some housing and commercial was believed to be a viable option. If that doesn't work, the community can do what the Santa Venetia community did when they didn't want the 10 units of housing on Heron Hill, put their money together and make an offer to the property owner, and then buy it and do what the community wants to do with it. Heron Hill now will be protected as open space because the community took that kind of an approach.
Okay, now we're going to do something just a tiny bit different just for these next 2 questions. I have a question just for you, Susan, and then after you're done, you have 1:30 to answer the question, and then you will have 30 seconds just to react to what she said. And then the same thing, there's another question, a very different question for you. You'll have 1:30, and you'll have 30 seconds to respond. Okay, this is a long one. Marinwood Plaza LLC has publicly acknowledged the existence of dry cleaner toxic contaminants at Marinwood Plaza since 2007. It now threatens the Silveira Branch water well supply across the 101. The Water Board issued an order for cleanup by 2016. However, this community member claims that you, Susan, and Mark Levine lobbied the Water Board to delay the cleanup to the benefit of the property owner and Bridge Housing on the eve of the hearing in February of 2014, and are asking that you please explain these actions and your position.
Well, that's a false allegation.
Okay.
I never influenced the Regional Water Board. They're an independent board. They make their own decisions based on science. The issue around the toxics plume is a really important one, but there have been no toxic contaminants identified in the wells of the Silveira at this point, and the testing has been continuing. The property owners have been injecting toxic eating microbes and have been reducing the toxic load. And the plan that the regional body said that if there's a development, the best way to clean that up is to scoop it out and remove it to a toxic hazardous waste site, cap it with clean fill, and do it and use it for another purpose. That's what happened when the gas station on the corner closed, with the north end of the property, which, by the way, will be a fully market rate part of the proposal and pay their full freight in taxes if it does get redeveloped. And that site is clean. So we're going to continue monitoring this. Certainly it's important for us to clean up that site, especially before anything would be done for it. And the property owners have already spent about $500,000 trying to reduce the load, which will take way too long. So really the best way to address this is to pull out what's under the building, which means you have to take down some of that building and remove it to a toxic hazardous site. But it's absolutely not true that I influenced a regional body.
That's why it's good to refute some of what the community believes. Okay, your chance to respond.
So it is absolutely a serious issue. Another thing I was concerned about is in a March 15, 2013 Marin IJ, Marin voiced these entitled Dispelling Fears of Housing. Supervisor Adams wrote, "Phase 1 brought our wonderful grocery store and farmer's market. An eyesore has been transformed. The toxic waste remediated, and a vibrancy is returning." My understanding is the state still has an order that it must still be remediated.
Okay, and this one's for you, and then you have 30 seconds after that. The Marin Civic Center Station Area Plan was originally designated a priority development area plan for between 3,000 and 7,500 housing units. How did the plan first get in place, and how did you work towards and come to the decision that the designation should be rescinded?
So we received grant money to do planning for infrastructure around the station. There was a task force that came up with recommendations. It came to a public hearing in August 2012. In my view, the plan called for too much density. So I raised concerns about that, about the plan at that time, specifically to keep the east side of the freeway commercial. Upon cross-examination, it turned out that what was being proposed was literally like 5-story apartment buildings in the Autodesk parking lot. It made no sense to me. And I also called for existing zoning to stay the same on the west side. The plan went forward with, if you will, a minority report. Over the course of the next year, with community involvement and input, we were able to turn it around, rescind the PDA, and actually get the stationary plan reduced to the original proposals that I had been making. So I'll give credit to Mayor Phillips as well, but I was proud to lead that effort.
Well, in 2012, when that report and the minority report was raised, there wasn't a no vote from one of those council members. Every council member voted to support that plan as it was, with a report to talk about the concerns that were raised. And in that report, there were 44 units per acre identified, 4 to 5 stories worth of housing. And I think even with the modified version, there are still 3-story multifamily units that are possible. And that's done. Dinner time?
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
And my colleague here, you know, was very proud of having mediated the housing piece of it for the Northgate Mall to incorporate at some future time housing at Northgate Mall.
The study.
So on to homeless. We have quite a, I don't know if you've been in downtown San Rafael, but there are, especially near that parking garage, a lot of homeless there. And so I'm curious from both candidates, what do you see as options for providing a permanent shelter for the homeless in Marin County? Also, would you advise relocating the San Rafael Dining Hall and the Ritter Center? as well. But I know there's a lot of concern as many homeless are starting to progress, coming in from Novato, they're coming in from San Rafael, and they could land right here in Marinwood.
Wow. Well,
We were already seeing them in Terra Linda as well.
so, you know, homelessness is an issue that's facing every city and town and county across the country. We just came through the worst recession ever. I launched the Homeless Policy Coordinating Committee in 2005 because people weren't talking about homelessness at that time. And we created the first 10-year plan to end homelessness. We accomplished about 80% of that plan. And we've just now revamped it so that we're making the next steps. These are the things that we've done at the county. And I know, Damon has said the county needs to deal with this problem, but this is a problem that every city and town in the county needs to work on together. I was able to access 35 VASH vouchers. Those are Section 8 vouchers that are used only for veterans. So homeless, mentally ill veterans are now housed. I was able to get funding to do the Housing First program in the city in coordination with Ritter. The county is a major funder for the streets team that San Rafael's really proud of. The county fully funds 55 shelter beds at Mill Street and is a major partner in funding Novato's Homeward Bound programs. We also administer Prop 63 funds, which provide shelter and funding for homeless, mentally ill people. Altogether, the county is putting in $14 million countywide to address homelessness. And I just met with the mayor and with Kate Collin, who is leading a intercity agency discussion about where can we place housing. The county and the Marin Community Foundation will continue to be a partner in this. But it really bothers me when I, hear the mayor identify sites that are way out in unincorporated Marin, like McPhail's or Juvenile Hall, as possible sites to replace a homeless facility. And I don't think the people in Lucas Valley are going to go for a homeless shelter in Juvenile Hall.
Yeah, that actually does not have any basis. I know that rumor is being spread out there. The mayor is not calling for that. This is a complex issue. San Rafael is proud of the work we're doing on homelessness because it's a growing problem, and it's really a countywide issue demanding countywide solutions. What San Rafael is doing is the Downtown Streets team, which is putting the homeless to work. I'm proud to report that 12 of the participants in the program have actually gotten full-time work in and around 4th Street. We have a mental health officer because a lot of the homeless are suffering from severe mental illness. There are 3 things I want to address right away as the county supervisor. One is that the county mental health budget is $46 million. I like to get in there and take a fresh perspective at how that money is being spent and whether we need to reallocate money to the growing homeless problem. The second is chronic inebriation, which is a huge part of the homeless issue. The Helen Vine Center, which has about 25 beds, is slated to be closed. And even as things stand, oftentimes the solution is a jail cell or an emergency room bed. That's not the way to go. We actually have to create more beds for that issue. And the third is the REST program, which is the emergency shelter program, is now closing. We do need to find a permanent location. San Rafael is willing to step up and work with the county. One thing I bring is a better city-county relationship to get that done.
Okay, you might not want to put that down. You're taking this next one first. Could you promise the voters that you will not accept campaign money from parties whose contracts with the county you must vote on? Would you agree that consultant fees should be determined by results achieved? And would you support legislation similar to the READ initiative that would allow adjustments in future earnings and pensions for public employees? That's quite a loaded question there.
Yeah, so
quite a few questions.
Yes to the first 2, no to the third. I do think we need campaign finance reform. That sounds like a legitimate proposal. Well, and contracting is a significant issue. I think the go-to solution too often right now for the county is to hire consultants and contract out work, when I believe we do need to look at can we achieve more efficiencies and cost savings by using in-house labor. The third, and let me just preface it by saying I'm very proud of my pension reform record. In fact, I received the endorsement of Citizens for Sustainable Pension Plans, because throughout my tenure, San Rafael has been a leader in pension reform. We're significantly reducing our unfunded liability. There's a lot more we need to do. But significantly, San Rafael was ranked #1 of 40 jurisdictions in the county in reducing the unfunded liability for health care. There's really 3 components we need to look at: pension unfunded liability, health care, and then the use of debt. And the county is way down on the list on health care in terms of the amount of liability. And they actually rely on $104 million in pension obligation bonds in order to increase their purported funding level for their pension liability. It's almost like you're borrowing against your credit card, sticking it in your checking account, and then bragging about the balance. It's not the way to go. The READ initiative has significant legal problems. I'm very concerned about breaking vested rights of employees in contracts. There's a reason that the READ initiative is not even going forward, and I suspect that's why.
So all of our campaign contributions are reported on FPPC reports. And my colleague took $5,000 from the ATU, which is a transit union that is dealing with our negotiations on how we provide public transit services in Marin County. And I have been really instrumental in getting money out of the Golden Gate Transit District so that we can enhance services, and they're not happy with me about that. In-house labor comes with pensions. So when we're looking at contracts, do you want to look at one-time small projects or even road projects that need to be done when we don't have the in-house staff? You contract out to the lowest bidder, the job gets done, and you're not paying a long-term pension. So there's pluses and minuses with contracting, and we do it very judiciously. The county's pension is 78% funded. Our medical retiree is 12% funded. We just put $50 million into it to pay it down. As a result of the aggressive way we're dealing with our pensions, we have a AAA Fitch and Moody rating. Only 2 other counties in the whole state of California can boast that. And we're continuing, even though we're getting double-digit returns on the retirement system, we're continuing to pay down on that obligation. A lot of this debt that we have came from contracts that were made 20 to 30 years ago. San Rafael's dealing with the same thing. But we've also restructured our tiers in our employees. Our employees now only get 2% at 61.5. I think San Rafael is still at 55. We have them paying more money into their pensions. We do 3-year averaging, no spiking, and spouses are no longer able to get pension, medical, retiree benefits. We cap the amount of money that's being given to the retiree who's been there 20 years or longer. So we have taken a very aggressive approach. We wouldn't have gotten the bond ratings that we have gotten if the bond companies thought that we weren't managing our finances well.
Okay, both of you, and I'm not sure if the audience, I'm sure you know a little bit about this, but the nomination of Lucas Valley Road to be designated as a scenic road, you're familiar with that? Because I have a lot of details if you need me to give you details on it. No? Okay. You do? Well, so basically, I'll just read this anyway. So it will bring fiscal benefits to the county and will make new grants available for the maintenance and enhancement of our natural scenery. It will not be marketed for visitors. It will honor our scenic resources and public open space. Lucas Valley Road is the only county road that meets the necessary criteria that has already been deemed eligible by the Caltrans Scenic Road Program. Furthermore, Caltrans has proven that the designation will not increase traffic on Lucas Valley Road. For it to happen, however, a District 1 supervisor must nominate the road to the Scenic Road Program. So first to you, Susan, when we nominate the road is what they're asking.
I brought this to our board during our first financial hearings, our budget hearings that we had a few weeks back. And the general plan actually calls for an overall evaluation of all the beautiful roads that we have here in Marin County, including our coastal highways, our agricultural lands. And the staff were proposing that we would want to look at it in a more comprehensive way and then prioritize where those scenic roads. The issue didn't drop. I asked to have an analysis of what the cost would be, and we're going to have to take a look at, in their plan, if we want to put scenic roads in, something else will have to come out because we're operating really tight at the county. We reduced our workforce by 11%. We're working with 250 less people on our workforce. So there are other projects that we're working on too, like watershed projects. And so the question is, do we want to start working on the Miller Creek watershed, or do we want to switch it off with scenic roads? And those are the conversations that we're going to have in the budget hearing. But I did bring it up. I've been meeting with the community that's interested in it. I think there's some misunderstandings that if you put in a scenic road that it means you're never going to get to develop anything, and that's not true. We've checked that. We already also have very good protections on our ridge lines and our watersheds, stream conservation area ordinances that protect all of our beautiful sensitive areas with setbacks and no development up to a certain period of a certain height. So, you know, certainly we live in an amazing, beautiful valley, and I'm committed to keeping it an amazing, beautiful valley, and I promise I'm going to continue working with the community as we grapple with this.
Damon, if you are elected, will you support the community's request to nominate Lucas Valley Road as one of your first actions elected as District 1 Supervisor?
Yes, I will. This is an issue I have been doing a lot of research on, a lot of community outreach on, and I think it is an issue worthy pursuing through the nomination. I'm not quite sure it's accurate that it's an either or, for example, on scenic road designation versus Miller Creek water restoration. In fact, my understanding is if you are able to designate scenic road, it may open up additional state grants and funding that allow you to protect a watershed. More fundamentally, I think it is a way to, in effect, do what the community in Lucas Valley has been seeking to do unsuccessfully through the county for a number of years, and that is to have a local community plan that really brings it to the grassroots level in terms of planning key issues facing the local community going forward, including how to develop protection of natural resources. Originally, there were a couple of concerns raised that I contemplated. One is, would the designation result in a loss of local control, since it's technically a state program? I'm convinced it would not. And then another concern I've been hearing is, would it create more traffic? I haven't seen no data suggesting that. That's one of our most beautiful roads. There's a lot of sightseeing there anyway. So I think this is a way to do some local planning, potentially get some more grant money, protect views. Ultimately, what I'd like to see is perhaps to extend it out to Nicasio, so I would need to work with Supervisor Steve Kinsey to do that. I'm prepared to do so. Just a quick retort to the comment about the ATU, and also I'm proud about my support of public transit. Supervisor Adams is funded thousands of dollars by Marin Association of Public Employees, SEIU, the Dutra Rock Quarry, $5,000 or more. So be careful who throws the first stone, I know.
Okay, Susan had mentioned about the watershed, and it's a Miller Creek watershed, and it's a big priority for her. If you were elected, would you make the needed Miller Creek watershed county restoration effort a top priority as well?
Yeah, I would. And again, everything's a question of money, community resources. But again, this has been a long time ongoing issue that has been unaddressed. So it's something I will definitely get into. In fact, I've been very involved in watershed issues. I have the support of a lot of the leaders of the Galenas Watershed Council. We actually are looking at ways of restoring the Galenas watershed, and the county is also involved in that. In fact, one of my votes in particular on the soccer complex out there is where I was really pushing for a solution that would preserve, and in fact, enhance wetlands in that area. Ultimately, right now, with climate change, with sea level rise, we need to take a watershed approach to planning. And that means not just looking right at the creek bank or stream bank, but what are the effects of development upland from that? For example, it's a big issue in Santa Benicia right now as well. So I think we can do a better, more comprehensive job. It is money, but my sense is right now, with sea level rise, a tremendous issue, we need to shake the branches, get money, and improve our watersheds, including Miller Creek, which, from what I understand from the immediate community there, is an issue that has been requested over the years, but not adequately responded to.
And Susan, it's been an issue for a while. Where are we at in the process?
Well, I love how Damon's trying to take credit for the Las Colinas Watershed Project, because I've been working on that with the Santa Benicia community for years. And not only that, but we're currently conducting a study on the McNicholas Marsh, converting that back to a natural state, using horizontal levees to help sponge and absorb the water as sea level rise happens, to help nature help us with flood zone issues. We asked the city of San Rafael to contribute $80,000 because 2/3 of that watershed is inside the city of San Rafael. We got $50,000, but the other partners, including the Las Colinas Sanitary District, the flood zone, the CSA 6, which does dredging, and the county, paid the bulk of the rest of that. I'm happy that we're actually having conversations about this with the city of San Rafael now. And in terms of the watershed in Miller Creek, I've been working with the community. Mike Elgie, who lives in the Mount Muir Court area, has erosion problems. We have Liz Lewis, our Public Works Director, who has a whole hydrology analysis that's being done. And as soon as we get some closure on the Las Colinas watershed studies, because we're very limited with our staff, we're spread thin, we're gonna start working by this fall very actively on the implementation of the watershed plan in Miller Creek. And we have our kids in Miller Creek Middle School have done some restoration already as part of their environmental science program. So helping to train the next generation of our watershed stewards is happening in our schools. And I've been also a supporter of the Terra Linda school program, the SEL program for the environmental leadership. And those students are doing some pretty incredible projects in helping to not only restore watersheds, but put in plug-in chargers and creating a cleaner energy future. So there is a lot to do, but I'm committed and I've been doing it.
Many Marin County residents, along with several recent grand juries, have advised making changes to the Community Service Fund, better known as the Board of Supervisors Slush Fund. The grants given out by the supervisors are not always donated with objectivity, according to this community member, and could be seen as nurturing political favor. How do you feel about these donations of taxpayer money, and do you have any suggestions for modifications?
Well, first of all, it's a misstatement to say it's a slush fund. A slush fund means you're getting the money, it's going into your pocket for your own personal use, and that's not what this is. Community service funds have been used to put computers in Miller Creek School in partnership. They've been used to get after-school programs going for our kids. They've been used for chipper days for communities that want to do wildland vegetation management. They've been small grants that have leveraged larger money to allow the communities to do the work they need to do. And there's nothing that has gone to directly to a nonprofit or another governmental agency that hasn't come to the Board of Supervisors first in an open public process. It's noticed on the Board of Supervisors agenda, and everything is open. So, and there have never been any members of the public coming to say that what was being proposed for those community partnerships was wrong. Now, it's creating so much, heat. Is it worth, keeping it? At this point, the dollars have been reduced so low now that there's not a lot of bang for the buck. Those community service funds actually helped fund a study in Santa Venetia that helped those community members, low and middle income family members who are strapped to do a study, and it didn't come out of their flood zone money. It was a partnership. And I think that, when you're elected to be a supervisor, you're supposed to respond to your community. You're supposed to try to help them do the things that they want to have happen in their community. And to have those resources available helped us with projects that come up outside of the budget cycle. So now what we're looking at is, do we just incorporate our certain nonprofit partners that are providing the after-school programs, or when they need computers, put it in a line item budget that can be drawn down from. Those are conversations that we're having.
I do oppose the Community Service Fund, aka slush fund, on transparency grounds, and also because in effect it is a form of political patronage, in my view, as the civil grand jury called it. A lot of the programs that are funded are worthwhile. I believe we should take those up in the ordinary budget process. Make the case that it's a worthwhile issue, build a coalition, convince your colleagues, make it transparent, and I think that's the way to do it. There are examples of problems that are created in the current system, and it is still over $300,000 a year, so it is fairly significant money. And although there have been some reforms, the basic problems with the program still exist. Supervisor Adams referred to a flood levy study. She actually delegated hundreds of thousands of dollars out of her portion of the fund to that. It ultimately became part of a $1 million allocation for the levy study. And basically, the end result of the study was simply to determine that the Army Corps of Engineers would not pursue any levee work, that the Santa Venetia levees would not qualify for Army Corps programs or work. So I believe that a lot of those issues could have been more properly vetted, particularly at that level of funding, through the ordinary budget process. And that's, I would draw a firm line that let's do away with the existing process.
Okay, this is a long one as well. On June 24, 2013, the Marin County Planning Commission voted to rezone areas protected by the Marin County-wide Plan 2007, which was later approved by the Board of Supervisors. Will you enforce the existing Marin County-wide Plan 2007 and fight to reverse the Marin Planning Commission's and Board of Supervisors approved rezoning of environmentally sensitive areas, which line protected ridge and upland green belts? Or will you allow the protected areas to be rezoned high-density affordable housing? Okay.
That question seems a little bit vague, like what rezoning is it talking about, what areas? But I think I've made my position clear that if areas are designated for environmental protection, I do not believe they should be redesignated for high-density housing. But I'm a little bit vague on the what specifically they're talking about or what areas. Again, a case in point is St. Vincent Silveira's. I supported Supervisor Adams' position when she ran in 2002 to preserve that area. I think it has environmental and cultural significance for Marin regionally. I think that land should be preserved. It has been redesignated now since Supervisor Adams has been on the board. I think that's a change in position on her part. I would continue to advocate for preserving that property. So if that's an example, that's kind of my philosophy on it.
And just to go back to a couple of things, the levy study money did come to the Board of Supervisors, and it did have an open public hearing on that issue. So it didn't just, I wasn't just doling out dough there, Damon. It's also not true that the only result was the determination that the community wasn't eligible for Army Corps funds. There were hydrology, geotechnical studies, sedimentation studies that are all going to be important as we implement the next phase of the plan. So those studies were needed regardless of whatever the answer was. I launched the Baylands Corridor in the countywide plan. We had coastal, inland rural, urban corridor, and because of sea level rise, made a very strong push to protect our bayland areas. I'm still committed to St. Vincent's and Silveira. Not having development as the cows are still grazing there 12 years later. Okay, nobody has developed anything there. And the issue around the zoning came through a 7-year process with the general plan. 7 years, and my Board of Supervisors wanted higher density. So sometimes it's better to try to move it closer toward where your goals are than to just say no and be the only no vote. Because as with the airport that was being talked about earlier, while there was conversation about not having the airport have a soccer complex, it's 87,000 square feet, the vote didn't carry. It was a minority vote, and some of leadership is moving your issue closer so that you can get at least 3 votes to get the job done. And I've been able to do that. So yes, we have a maximum of 221 units. They have to be clustered in the already built area. They can't be sprawled. And there's 1,150 acres out there. So again, if we want to protect the property, then we have an opportunity to do what our forebears did with the Ridgeland areas along Lucas Valley Road, perhaps assess ourselves and protect those permanently.
Okay, and so, as I said, these are all from the community. I did not write these. Why is Marin cooperating with ABAG and its inflated jobs and population projections instead of challenging them? Considering their means of controlling development is by extortion, how do you feel about opting out? I did write this. Feel about opting out of ABAG and forming a council of governments for Marin County to determine our own future?
Okay, so the late Supervisor McNicholas and I did try to form a Marin County cooperative, and the cities and towns weren't interested. They said, we want to plan our own way. We don't want the big 600-pound gorilla of the county telling us what to do. ABAG it's all elected people that sit on that. They represent the 9 Bay Area counties and 101 cities and towns. The conversations that they're having is how do we see ourselves in the future? If we're going to grow, how do we grow? Do we want to sprawl like LA County? Or do we want to make a focused effort on protecting our conservation areas, our agricultural areas, our ports and industrial areas? What a lot of people don't realize is there were also priority conservation areas that came out of ABAG. And we have a number of those in the queue for consideration for some extra funding. The MTC, our Metropolitan Transportation Commission, is not getting the same funds that they used to get. The money that we get to repair our roads comes from state taxes and gas taxes. Well, people are buying hybrids and electrics, and there's less gas taxes, and they haven't raised the gas tax in 20 years. So the question was, if we're going to invest extra transportation money, we want to do it in areas where they are going to take some growth on transit-oriented corridors. San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose are taking 1/3 of the growth. 15 of the cities and towns throughout the Bay Area are taking 2/3 of the growth. Marin County is being allocated less than 1% of the growth, and that's in all of our cities and towns as well as unincorporated Marin. I fought very hard to reduce the last housing element we had the 773 units. I was new at that time. Nobody listened to me when I said we have water issues. But in the next housing element that we now have that has 185 units, that was because the people at ABEG finally heard what we were saying about low growth here in Marin County.
I think we absolutely do need to stand up to ABEG on the numbers they're proposing for our communities. And again, I'll note that Supervisor Adams was one of the leaders of ABEG when the PEA numbers were put on Marin, and I think the community justifiably was concerned about those. Supervisor Adams mentioned earlier AB 1537, which calls for reducing the default density that would be called for our community from 30 units per acre to 20 units per acre. I actually support that legislation as well. It should be noted, though, that idea has been around for a long time, and it's never actually even gotten past step one in the legislature. It's not something we can rely on as a solution. Furthermore, the legislation she's touting has been watered down now in this session. It's not a solution we can count on. We have to stand up for ourselves as communities, both in the legislature, but also regionally, and fight back if it doesn't make sense for us. Novato actually took that approach, and they actually got a lower default density approved through their housing element. There's some issue about whether they then became a by right jurisdiction, which means less ability for them to do discretionary review. The county's taking the position that that's the bad consequence, but that's not uniformly agreed to. I think it's something worth pursuing. I actually took the position when Senator Fell was asked, I don't think we should leave ABAG. My position is we should work from within.
We have just a few more questions left, so if you have heard anything tonight and you want to follow up on it, spot Justin Kai and write your question down so that we can get your follow-up questions, because you've been absolutely amazing tonight. I want to make sure your concerns are heard. Community housing element workshops are being framed with emotional videos that encourage subsidized housing, yet there is no balance to this, conveying resident concerns about impacts on taxes, traffic, and parking. These workshops are modeled after ABAG's planned Bay Area workshops with what they consider manipulative facilitators, inappropriate forced choices, and strictly curtailed discussion. If elected, what steps will you take to discourage such tactics and provide genuine opportunities to discuss Marin's future and build authentic consensus?
I have not seen the videos, so I cannot vouch for the characterization, but the issue is one that kind of cuts to the heart of my campaign, and that is a different kind of leadership, a different kind of approach in community engagement. It's something we're doing in San Rafael right now, where we're actually, we have a program called the GREAT program, generating resident engagement and transparency. We live in an era now with social media, with other forms of communication, where there probably was a time when, and we see it still, where essentially elected officials were out talking to residents. It really has to be a two-way dialogue. And what I promise to you and what I've been doing as a council member is not just talking to you, but genuinely with you, listening to your concerns. That's by far how we get the most ability to make good, sound decisions. The good news is Marin County has very passionate people who are willing to express their opinions. Now, it makes the job a little bit more challenging too, but in a good way. And that's really how I want to go forward in representing you as your supervisor. Again, there are no more important issues for our community than development issues. Let's be more proactive. let's get the community involved on the front end, anticipate issues, have a meaningful dialogue where we're listening, not just talking at. And I think we can just do a lot better job. Our residents have great energy, they have great ideas.
Thank you. You know, on AB 1537, first of all, I've been traveling back and forth to Sacramento. I've built coalitions, and it actually made it through the two most difficult committees in the Assembly. And it's going to go to the floor vote of the Assembly. And I'm also working on the Senate. So even if it is only for one cycle this cycle, it's 20 units per acre. My colleague has not joined me in any of those efforts to make that happen. So to talk about it, but to do it are two different things. Novato accepted the by right jurisdiction, and because there is a question that it would streamline CEQA and not allow for a full public process, the county decided that wasn't worth it. And that this community, we're hearing the community saying, we want full CEQA analysis. So that's why we chose that. I saw the housing video. It doesn't do what's being alleged. I encourage all of you to look at it. It shows a teacher and a firefighter who are talking about their long commutes and saying that, you know, we have some issues with affordable housing. I don't think anybody here argues that. The polls that we've done in the county, some of my own polls have shown that affordable housing is a big issue. The devil's in the details on where does it go. I have been very proactive in meeting with the community. There's a lot of confusion about what is Plan Bay Area, what's a housing element, how do specific plans get developed. I have a lot of information on my website. I took the leadership in making sure that our county chambers were all fibered up, so every public meeting you can watch. We archive them. All the documents that are associated with it are there. So there's nothing that's secret in our deliberations. And I encourage you to take a look because there's some very interesting theater that happens sometimes in our board chambers. Community is important, and I listen to all community. I'm not just listening to the people that are saying no to the plaza. There are a number of people in the community that are saying yes, they want redevelopment. They're a little nervous about what that's going to look like, but we have to listen to everybody, Damon, not just the people that are saying no.
Okay, a question from our audience here, a follow-up question regarding Marinwood Village. According to a Spotswood's IJ article from 5/18, HUD claims Marin is too white. Will the bridge project be mandated to seek out or advertise specifically to people of color?
No. There are fair housing laws in play that say that you have to open up the opportunities for people who want to come in. And what Bridge has said that they would do is advertise within our local network first. So if there are teachers or people working in our, there's 3 guys in the grocery store that said if there is some affordable housing built here in the community, they'd like to live here because they're coming from Santa Rosa and Vallejo right now. And they're coming here to bag our groceries for us. And so, you know, the opportunities will be expressed first more locally concentric, then countywide. And in the other 8 bridge projects that are done, if any of you, again, that you've been invited to go and see these programs and look at who's living there and see how they're maintained. But if you go, you'll see that 98% of the people that are living in these programs are actually people that have either worked here, like our seniors who are living in the Rotary Village, or who are currently working here. And it's providing an opportunity for people who are part of the fabric of our community to have an opportunity to earn their money here, spend their money here, recreate here, and have their children be able to attend the great schools here. And I think that, you know, we can do this in a way that reflects our community character. I don't have a problem with our teachers living in our community. Bridge also has on-site property management on their projects. They do credit background checks and criminal background checks on every single person that applies, and they check their past tenancy. So these are working people that have good credit rating and that haven't been in trouble with the law in their programs. So let's be careful when we're making broad allegations that people that are living in nonprofit affordable housing are a certain kind of people that we don't want in our community.
I'm not aware of those requirements either. But going back to something Supervisor Adams said, I'm not saying only no, I'm not only listening to people, only saying no. I'm raising legitimate issues that have been raised by the community about the proposal. Something needs to be done there, but let's make it the right kind of development for our community, meeting community needs. And no one's saying we don't want teachers to live in the community. Quite the contrary, and I think throwing that out there does not really help, frankly, the conversation. So let's have an honest dialogue. We all recognize that something has to be done at that shopping center. I think something that we can be proud of. But to be that dismissive of legitimate issues that have been raised by the community, in my view, does not serve the community well.
But the question actually was, HUD claims Marin is too white. Will the bridge project be mandated to seek out or advertise specifically to people of color?
I'm not aware of that requirement.
Okay, here's another question. I had one about Grady Ranch. What do you feel is the proper type of development and density on the Grady Ranch? I know we touched on Grady Ranch earlier, but someone wants some follow-up on that.
Yeah, so I'm opposed to the development that's called for there. I think there's significant constraints in terms of water there, resources. I do not believe that's a suitable area for residential housing. I will say that the Grady Ranch issue has been called a debacle for good reason. I think whether you were for or against the George Lucas Grady Ranch proposal, it was an example of some of the issues we've been raising tonight, namely that the project was promising but had significant environmental issues that basically were not addressed until the very end, if at all. We've got to be way more proactive. I think another solution in that area is to come up with a local community plan. I think Lucas Valley residents want it. And I think it's a way where, as a community, we can do planning around what do we want out there? What are the resource constraints? That is one of the big issues. We have to deal with the reality of what kind of water supply we have and other resource constraints.
Okay, Justin.
So, do I answer that?
Oh, yes. Sorry. I was distracted.
Okay, just to remind people again, what something is zoned for doesn't mean that's what actually happens. The Lucas Valley Oakview property was zoned so that the property owner could build hundreds of houses and commercial on that site. It was through the public process, 20 years of environmental review before they finally got approved with their master plan in 2005 for 28 units of housing. 6 of them would have second units and a senior living facility. And in 2005, you still see the sign out there with the for sale. There hasn't been one permit pulled. So even when something is master planned and entitled, you may not see something there for a while. It's very expensive to put new utilities. Now let's fast forward to Mr. Lucas. And how many of you think you can tell Mr. Lucas what to do or what to apply for his property? You know, he has ideas about what he wants to do. He had ideas about the commercial. It didn't work out. There were issues that came up. Regional water quality was late to the table in expressing their concerns. That's why the Board of Supervisors put the brakes on to go back and look at that. And in that period of time when we were looking at that, he decided he was going to withdraw his entitlement and application for the commercial project, saying, now I'm going to put housing there. Well, there hasn't been one development application that has come to the planning department. And if something comes forward, it's going to be going through the very big, long, extensive process that we're known for here in Marin County. I don't think single-family residences works as well there because it's car dominant. But perhaps something like a senior facility similar to Rotary Village, maybe having a Rotary Village too. When I've talked to the Lucas Valley Estates members, they seem open to something like that if it should come. But ultimately, it's Mr. Lucas that's going to decide what he wants to propose.
Okay, this one just in. Automobile exhaust is a leading cause of air pollution in the county. What do you think is required to make sure that the Smart Train project reduces air pollution in Marin? And what would you do as supervisor to make the requirements a reality? Overall, what is your vision on the Smart Train project?
Well, I raised a lot of concerns about SMART. First of all, they were underfunded. They weren't asking the right amount of money for what they were proposing. Secondly, it was the density issue around the train stations. Thirdly, when you don't have enough money, then you start cannibalizing the other public service transit programs in the community. And you don't want to have, 3 failed transit systems, Golden Gate, Marin Transit, and SMART. Regarding the diesel, that's the SMART board, which is made up of representatives from both Marin County, I think the mayor serves on the SMART board, the mayor of San Rafael, and Sonoma County and Golden Gate make those decisions. So it's in their jurisdiction. The issue around auto exhaust, actually I serve on the Bay Area Air Quality Management District as a director. We just had a report done that showed that in the last 10 years, where Marin County had some air quality problems, 10 years later, we're not showing up with the same problems. The problem areas in the Bay Area are along the 580, 880 corridors, and that's where they're focusing a lot of their attention, with the exception of wintertime when we like to light up our fireplaces. Then we have a little bit of a challenge. But certainly they are looking very closely at not only the toxics that are in exhaust, but black carbon, and the movement that we're seeing in Marin County for hybrids, electrics, hybrid electric vehicles. We're putting charging stations in, we're putting solar panels up. The greenhouse gases are getting reduced from the infrastructure, and I'm also working on a project in West Marin called the Marin Carbon Project, which is helping our agriculturalists sequester carbon, retain more water in their ag lands, and improve the rangelands. And I'm working with the Air Quality District now on developing cap and trade regulations that will allow our agriculturalists to tap into those resources.
My vision is that we provide people with a number of ways to reduce trips in their car. So I've been a big advocate for bicycle and pedestrian options in San Rafael. I'd like to take that leadership to the county as well. I'm a supporter of the SMART train, but we have to keep it fiscally on track. I'm convinced right now that there is a fiscal plan to bring it operational by 2016. A key component of it is that it has to connect with the ferry. There's funding slated for that now, but that's something I'm going to continue to make sure happens and advocate for, just to make it truly convenient for commuters. Ultimately, we'll have to see how ridership looks and fiscally how it pencils out, but I believe it is on track right now. As the chair of San Rafael Sustainability Committee, I've been in the lead on promoting electric vehicle charging stations in Marin. That's something I'll continue to do. And as the chair of Marin Clean Energy, of course, I'm really advocating that we move toward ultimately 100% carbon-free renewable energy. My ultimate vision is for Marin County residents to be able to own electric vehicles, in other words, pure carbon-free, and plug into electric vehicle charging stations around town. Ultimately, I see that in our future. In the meantime, I agree with the issue of it's not ideal that SMART has diesel trains. That's something I'd like to work on going forward as well.
So I'm going to try this question. I'm not sure if I can read this properly. But given official CARB and fact figures that show cars have lower emissions than transit, Can we now drop climate change as the rationale for TOP? TOD. Thank you.
I mean, obviously, I think the premise of the question assumes, in effect, low ridership of transit. I don't think there's any question that if our train is full and our buses are full, there's less carbon emissions per capita than a vehicle. So the issue, again, is making sure that our systems continue to pencil out. One thing of concern to me is while we have good regional bus service, our local bus service tends to be very user-unfriendly. I went for a full year in 2011 without a car. My 10-year-old car broke down. I said, you know what, I'm going to ride transit for a year. And managed to get around, rode my bike a bit as well. But what I found is oftentimes a trip that would take 15 minutes by car would take like 60 to 90 minutes by bus locally. People aren't going to ride the bus if it's that inconvenient, despite the fact that we know in the back of our mind we might be reducing emissions. So one thing I'd like to do is get in there right away and work with all the affected stakeholders in the community to improve our local transit system, really make it meaningful.
Well, I cast the deciding vote for Marin Clean Energy, and we provided $2 million as a startup, which was paid back with interest after 6 months. So I'm glad to have been able to provide you with the opportunity to chair that committee, council member. The local bus service in 2014 is different now. What you were experiencing in 2011, we've increased frequency. We have 3 new shuttles that are running more frequently in our community, clean burning fuel, and the ridership, in order for it to pencil out, needs to be about 7 to 8 riders per hour. We are functioning at 11 to 15 riders per hour. And they are transit-dependent people, seniors who no longer can drive, people who don't have cars, like you were in 2011, and young people who don't have their licenses yet. My grandson takes public transit everywhere. I take the public transit to the Marin Civic Center, not so much lately on the campaign trail, but it is a wonderful way to get around in the community, and it does go to key places. And I encourage all of you to try it at least once. Grab one of our little shuttles and see where it takes you. I've also been very involved with creating bicycle and pedestrian access. I worked with former Mayor Boro to create the access through a very difficult part of San Rafael and the Lincoln Hill. There's a Class 1 pathway there now. There's also sound walls there that the Lincoln Hill community had asked us for, and I fought really hard to make sure that that stayed in the budget. The bicycle pathway and the pedestrian pathway that goes through from San Rafael into the Larkspur community has been very successful. We've seen big increases in users, with not only cyclists but pedestrians and moms with strollers. And as we're looking at finishing to make the connection to the Larkspur ferry, we're making it even more user-friendly.
Okay, we have 2 more questions and then a wrap up. And this one is a little bit loaded. There are a couple questions in this one. Do you feel Oakview as a for-profit development site is fair to compare to an affordable housing project? And do you feel Bridges' senior low-density housing project at Rotary Village is fair to compare against Marinwood Village?
They're all different, and they all provide different kinds of purposes. And the Oakview, I mean, it's not built yet. It's just still a plan on a piece of paper. So whether it ever gets built or not will depend on whether there's a developer that has the resources to put in all the utilities and everything that's needed on a hill that doesn't have that. In terms of Bridge, we're going to go through the process now, a full CEQA environment, which means environmental review. All of the comments, for any of you that showed up to that scoping session and you said, we want this studied and not studied, those are all going to be studied. There's going to be reports that are going to be produced. The draft studies will come out later this fall. And we'll all have an opportunity to pick them apart and to see whether or not our questions were answered. But they're different, and they provided different kinds of housing for different groups of people. And once again, you know, I'm gonna say that I think that median home price is selling for $900,000, and a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in Marinwood is renting for $3,400. That's what I saw next door recently. You know, how can anybody, especially our kids, my kids can't afford to live here, Damon's kids won't be able to afford to live here. We need to be able to find creative options, and certainly, you know, second units and co-housing and, you know, those other things that we can do to try to stretch our housing stock can work, but there's not a lot of people stepping up to the plate to make those second units. In the last year, we only have 5 applications. Well, the state HCD will not approve a housing element if you say your whole 1,007 units are gonna be second units, because they'll look at your record and say this doesn't pass the straight face test, and they'll decline it. And so, you know, we have to be based in reality with the state. There are consequences if we don't comply with state law. Port of Madero was sued because they didn't comply with state law, and the judge found in favor of the housing, and they had to build the housing.
I think the community's concern with Oakview is those numbers are not even included in the housing element, and there's a question as to why. So in reality, there's actually even more of a disproportionate share of housing slated for District 1 as things stand. I think the Rotary Manor housing development, which is 11 units per acre, serves a necessary purpose. It's senior housing. We're in an aging population. There's no question about it. It's an issue we're grappling with in San Rafael. We're looking at a proposal that will be coming to us for the Whistle Stop redevelopment, which is calling for senior housing. I will commit that one of the big issues I will work on is how do we house an increasingly aging population in Marin. And I think the Rotary Village is a good example of that. You know, I've walked virtually all of Lucas Valley door to door, Marinwood. That project is always held out as an example of meeting a need, being compatible with the community, and I look forward to looking at other options where we can create that kind of housing.
Okay, and this is so we can end on a great note. What is the best quality about your rival candidate, and what decision, policy, or action do you admire?
Go, Damon, go. I've been waiting for this all cycle.
Well, I actually, I do admire Supervisor Adams' experience and focus on health care for women and children. I think it's a huge issue in society, oftentimes in need of significant attention, and I think with her background, she's really focused on those issues.
Was there a particular policy or action or something? You had mentioned also St. Vincent's.
Well, in terms of her original position on St. Vincent's, I think that's an example.
You were doing okay.
Yeah. It was Kim, it wasn't me. I think just the general philosophy on women's children health, which is also a big issue for me as a father of 2 daughters, and somebody really cares about health care. I think right now, with the Affordable Care Act being implemented, it's something I would really look forward to helping Marin take a leadership role on going forward.
So, you know, it might surprise some of you after hearing us tonight to know that Damon and I have been friends for quite a while. We've shared a number of similar policies over the years. We've had lots of conversations at the Northgate Bagel Shop, talking about policy, talking about the San Rafael Airport, talking about the 33 San Pablo development. And the one thing that I think has remained consistent, even in this election cycle, when everybody's jockeying for positions, is that I admire his continuing commitment to sharing a clean energy future, to looking at how we reduce our greenhouse gases, how we can make sure that we're living off the fossil fuel grid. And it's, I think, something that we both still share in common, and I still appreciate that about my friend.
And so now we have 2 minutes for each one of you to actually wrap up. And since we started with you, we'll start with you to wrap up, Susan.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for coming out tonight, and again, apologize for being a few minutes late. I guess I'd ask the voters to decide in this election, who are we as a community in Marin? Where do we see ourselves in the future? The future I see continues to protect our environment and our small family farm heritage. I see our future as moving completely off the fossil fuel grid and reducing our greenhouse gases and addressing climate change. The future I see protects our greenfield spaces and looks at our infill opportunities for much needed workforce housing for our teachers, our child care workers, and other service people who are part of the fabric of our community. The future I see does not allow our children to live in cars or homeless on the street, and in the last count, we had 200 homeless children, and their mothers were working. I have a strong record of environmental protection, which is why the Sierra Club has endorsed me. I cast the deciding vote that launched clean energy, and that took some political courage and leadership. Cows are still grazing at St. Vincent Silveira, so I'm still committed to the protection of those sensitive areas. And I just helped Santa Benicia with the purchase of Heron Hill, which will forever be in protection as open space. I've been working on watershed restoration, and I'm not just giving you campaign slogans and promises about what I will do. I have a long record of what I've been doing with you, by your side, addressing issues that you've asked me to address. And as your county supervisor, I want to continue working with you. Listening is important, but once we've listened, the policymakers have to act on what we've heard. And delivering the goods is also important, and I've delivered the goods, even though I know that in 11 years in office, I haven't made every single one of you happy every single time I've made a vote. We are a great community, and we know how to solve problems. I bring the experience and the leadership and a really long list of things, and I hope you'll vote for me and visit my website.
Well, I also want to thank everyone. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Supervisor Adams, for participating. It has been a great discussion this evening. Let's start with the fact that we live in a phenomenal, unique place here in Marin. But there is really a sense that we can do better, that we can shake it up at the Civic Center and provide more effective, responsive leadership. I'm committed to providing new energy and a fresh perspective in county government, and I'm running on my track record in San Rafael. I'm running what I'm calling a Big Tent campaign, where I literally have the support of labor, pension reformers, environmentalists, mountain bikers, neighborhood leaders and residents from all corners of the district. It's not because I tell people different things at different times. It's people know where I stand. I'm going to be straight with you, and I'm going to work day and night on your behalf and for the community. There's examples such as the slush fund, where I think we need to shake it up and provide more transparency. In environmental leadership, right now the county, even though the residents recycle at a 75% rate, the Civic Center is under 50%. Let's walk the walk. We can do better. I'm running on a theme of keeping the promise of Marin. What I mean by that is decision making based on local Marin values, informed by collaborative, community-based dialogue, resulting in effective, responsive local government for us. I'm proud to have the support of Congressman Jared Huffman, my whole city council, every member of the Dixie School Board, 4 out of 5 members of the San Rafael School Board. They know I can get the job done, and I respectfully ask for your vote.
Now we have a big round of applause. Our community. If you have any more questions, feel free, just approach me afterwards. I'll write down your question for you. If you want to email them to Justin, or if you want to get my email, or I'll try and check next door if you have more questions. And if you wouldn't mind, both of you, if we can send one email to each one of you with a follow-up if anyone has more questions that they didn't get a chance to get answered. Thank you so much, everyone.